Hi, everybody. I'm Scott, and thanks for joining me again today for another episode of the podcast in support of the films Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, this time part two. Larry Becker's here with me again today. He's one of the producers of the film. Hey, how you doing?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Great to see you. So today we want to jiggle your memory a little bit and talk about the Far East, which seems to have come up quite a bit during all the interviews for the film and in the podcasts. And it seemed to be a very active place once we decided to put somebody over there. And it started with Stuart Kamy, who we talked about, which was great to get him out of Chicago because he was a bit of a pain in the ass.
Stuart was that was a totally terrible choice. Stuart was not really capable to do that job. I wound up firing him, which is something I feel bad about because I forced him out when he was. But here's an example. Stuart, you're on the phone, Stuart, you're in the middle of the night, but you get the call to alarm clocks. Stuart, we have an ad going on Tuesday, the mink coat style, blah, 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 whatever it is. You have to go inspect them. You have to go into the factory today, inspect them, and make sure they get shipped. I can't go today. I'm cleaning my files. Stuart! That is a absolute accurate, and this is how it was there. He should have never, ever sent him there. He really wasn't capable to do that job.
And he decided to go out on his own after a little bit doing it. So then my former roommate, Tommy Pacilio, was sent over there until after about the same amount of time, he announced at my wedding that he would be departing to do the same thing.
But Tommy's coming. Oh, this one, Tommy. This one, we sent Tommy there. He said, Tommy's coming to work. I don't want him in the office. I said, Stuart, you really don't have a choice. In fact, I asked Stuart, I have to tell you, then Tommy may be your boss. Then I quit. I said, Stuart, I accept. Take your stuff and get out. To this day, I feel bad. To this day.
Stepped up next was my cousin Jeffrey, David Meltzer's younger son. And that's kind of where you step in towards the end of Jeffrey's tenure there and sort of how it led to you being in the Far East. But start and tell us.
Jeffrey, they sent him when I was the head of the New York office. They sent Jeffrey for a year or 2 years of training. Every morning I would come. I was the boss. I had a good job. Business was good. I had no worry. And I would say to myself in the end, whatever, Jeff, just relax. Don't say one thing. Let him, whatever. He'll be here for a year or two. We'll teach him the ropes and he'll go back to Chicago. And I would say by 9:15, I was screaming at him, screaming. I'm telling you, every day I take the train in, don't say anything. So yes.
With where we are in time and what you're doing at about the time that Jeffrey Meltzer is being assigned to the Far East.
So I was one of the merchandise managers in Chicago and had really just started traveling overseas. And Jeffrey was, again, he was put there because they needed somebody that was not going to springboard. It seemed that position was a springboard into your own business.
So
And
let me stop you for a second. So what was the problem? Because people were getting paid a pretty good sum of money, at least compared to the rest of us in the company. And does everybody get over there and does a little math and figure if I go and do this on my own, I'll just do it better? I'll do
no, I
better.
guess
I think that all of them, and the one that I knew the best was Larry Becker, because the other guys were gone by the time I became in charge at first. I think that they just became too familiar. They saw other people doing their own thing, making more money, and they felt they could do the same thing. That's all I will say about that. I just think that they saw a lot of money available, and they wanted more for them than for themselves, and they were living. I remember being at Larry Becker's apartment, and he was living the lap of luxury. It was a lovely apartment. He and his family were living a lovely life. He was making a great living, but they just they just gave it up. And I also think I think that everything, I think everything became a joke. Everything became a joke. And that might sound just silly, but I think everything just became a joke. Um, and maybe that's how you also get through certain things.
No, I think a lot of it has to do with the direction that you see the company going in and
Hmm.
the direction that you see yourself going in. I'm sure that in Tommy's case, in Stuart's case, eventually in my case, I came home with Evans, but ended up leaving to start my own business in Hong Kong a year later. So everybody had, their own differences. I was the only guy that didn't get the expatriate bonus. I got a repatriate bonus, which meant that when Stuart and Tommy and Jeff, I mean, they all got double the pay, that double their salary. I got my salary, which was quite handsome. I'm not complaining. I got my salary. And then for each year, I signed a 2-year contract to be there. For each year that I returned back to the States with Evans, I was to get another year, my bonus, the other half of the first and second years that I spent there. So for me,
Okay, so I took you off track there a little bit. So go back to where you are at the point in time when Jeffrey's there, and what your position was, and since you've heard the other podcasts and whatnot before this, were you sniping? What was going on? Let's get into the whole
absolutely.
thing there.
Korea was changing, especially. Korea was becoming much more high tech. I remember a couple of our vendors closed down and went into technology manufacturing. The fur was considered, low on the totem pole. So I think that was part of it also. But yeah, all I know is that, Larry wanted my job and had been sniping at me. And got it.
Absolutely not. I mean, okay, so I was the merchandise manager. I had been in, I was in 5 different positions. It was sort of like, and we had the same path. It was a customized training program where, we were being well, educated about everything in the industry. And at this point, I was a buyer, one of the merchandise managers, buyers in Chicago for the company. And I was traveling, I had been overseas a couple of times. I was pretty much one of probably the integral piece of fixing a big mistake it wasn't a big mistake in Hong Kong. It was like the manufacturing, but getting that thing done. Remember the Rare Bears, the
Yeah,
mink
yeah.
teddy bears? I think that may have been one of the reasons that I was thought of. But
This was during the time of the monotony of Rare Bear and our inability to be producing correct, samples. Not
Okay,
samples.
so do you know this whole story from the beginning?
Which story?
The Rare Bear story. So, like, May Company wanted these Rare Bears, which what, for store promotion that had nothing to do with us. So give us the background of this, because I'm fascinated by this disaster.
Okay, so I got involved not from inception, but pretty close. So I don't know exactly. I'm pretty sure. So there was a guy named Frank Nemirovsky, and Frank Nemirovsky lived in Palo Alto, California.
Oh,
He
I lived there
had
for 15 years.
Okay, so he had this patent on making 8-inch mink teddy bears and it was called Rare Bear. Well, evidently he solicited.
And he actually got a patent for that design. That's interesting. Essentially. a
Yeah.
nebbish nothing patent, but it came in, it
No,
came in handy, obviously.
Can I tell you something? It wasn't nebbish nothing. What it was brilliant, if you ask me, because he had it all. The patent was for the pattern to produce what I believe was like 40 rare bears from one mink plate skin. The plates were always 2 feet by 4 feet. That's the way that they were constructed. So it gave actually the opportunity for somebody, a manufacturer, to just lay this pattern over a mink plate and cut it out. I mean,
Yeah,
today
and
they
use
like
and use as much of every square millimeter as possible without
that was
waste.
the idea. There was zero waste, and again, we were doing it from mink sections. So what was waste was collected and then created another plate. You know what I mean? But our problem was that we had to give, I think it was like 200,000 teddy bears to the maid company. And we were having such a delay in getting approval on the prototypes and samples that we weren't collecting the plates fast enough. Now all of a sudden, oh well, what I'm going out of order. So Frank Nemirovsky, I believe he is the one that made a deal with the May company, but he didn't have the capacity or ability. He had a small factory in San Francisco.
Right, he's basically got a patent on a pattern, and he can't do anything with it otherwise.
Exactly. So somehow, some way, he found us. And I guess we looked at it and it made sense. I mean, we had the ability to produce it. And we were working for the May company. You know, the contract was with the May company and Evans. He was almost like he brought it together as an agent and got paid either a percentage or a fee for, the use of the pattern, whatever it was. But the guy was a snake. I mean, he really was. He almost got us all fucked up because he started making Barbie doll fur coats, but he did not have the permission of Mattel to do it. So it became, we were locked into this whole monotony of now having to perform on a contract with May Company. And they send me and Myron to Greece. It was July. Okay. It was probably 1988. It was July. I think we got off the plane and we're going to wonderful Castoria, which I believe in every language, not just English, Castoria translates to armpit. So that's where we're spending an unknown amount of time because the idea was we had to collect X amount of plates. And we had an agent there, Takis, that would take us around from place to place. Had you ever been in Castoria, Greece?
Nope, nope.
The entire town, entire city is in the fur industry. And it doesn't matter if you're a baker, if you have a bakery, in the back of the bakery, they're making fur. Every piece of pastry has some hair in it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
nice.
at the pharmacist, people are sitting with a sewing machine and making plates. That was like the biggest portion of the GNP out of Castoria. Anyway, Myron are there, like I say, in July. It was July, middle of July, and we get there, and I think it was 109 degrees outside
It's a
with
humidity.
110% humidity. But I got to tell you, we were booked into the most luxurious hotel in all of Castoria. It was called the Hotel Samus, and it was on beautiful Lake Samus. You know how you read in the Bible how Moses parted the sea for, the Jews to walk through to get, past to get to the desert? Well, Lake Samus, Greeks and visitors were able to walk on it because it was filled with garbage. and it was it was disgusting, and it smelled. And I remember pulling up to the hotel, and there was this big neon. The sign for the hotel was like 2 feet by 4 feet, but there was this big giant neon sign that says air conditioned. And it was like, okay, this is perfect. We got where I got a room that faces the lake. We got air conditioning. Everything is perfect. Well,
And this is before you know how crappy the lake is and everything, right?
yes, we walk into the hotel lobby.
What's the lobby? Yeah, start with the lobby.
Okay, the lobby had like about 20 folding bridge chairs and people that were just sitting in the lobby and talking, and there was nothing there, just the bridge chairs and people talking. Now we get the keys to our room, and we're both on the same floor. I go into my room, Myron goes into his room, and I do believe this was the first time that Myron had been in Greece. So, it was very exciting for him. I had been there several times. And all I can tell you is I get into my room and I'm looking around, and the first thing I notice is they have like louvers on the windows. There are no screens, just louvers. So I open it up, and that's when I got that beautiful scent of Lake Samus.
Oh, gross. And the site in Lasant.
It was spectacular. Now I'm saying, you know what? All I want to do is take a shower. It took us like 14 hours to get there. I just want to take a shower.
What comes out of that faucet, man?
Wait, let's go down. Let's go down to the bar and just get fucked up, right? Well, I go into the bathroom and I'm like, where the hell's the shower? And I call Myron. I said, Myron, do you have a shower in your room? He goes,
One per floor.
wait, he goes, no, I don't. I said, I don't have one either. He goes, I have a bathtub. And I said, you have a bathtub? I'm the senior buyer here. How did I get this? Is like David Meltzer spinning in first flip. How did you get a bathtub? And I said, you're full of shit. And I walk over to his room, and sure enough, he's got a bathtub. So now I go downstairs and I said, something is not right here. Oh, and then I couldn't find the thermostat because it was fucking hot in my room. And, and I go downstairs and I tell the guy, I says, there's no shower in my room. And he says to me, yeah, there's a shower in every room, in the bathroom. I said, well, I didn't think it was going to be in the bedroom. But he says, it's like jail. And he says to me, yeah, I said, I'm telling you, there's no shower. So he takes me upstairs and he brings me to the bathroom.
This is great.
And he says to me, there's your shower. And I said, where's my shower? The bathroom was about 2 by 2 and it had like a tiled floor. Well, in the right-hand corner, just next to the sink, was a different color tile. And the sink had one of these like pull-out things, like a sprayer, like you're doing your fucking dishes.
What
And he says,
that's how it is. I've been to places in Europe where it's like that too, where you just get a tub and with the thing you've got a shower sitting down, basically. I mean, that's in Europe.
why did Myron have a bathtub? Something wasn't right there. All I can tell you is, I said, this is crazy. I said, okay, answer another question for me. I said, it's 100 degrees in here. He says, open up the louvers. And I said, it's 110 outside. And he says, no, but you'll get fresh air from that.
Oh,
I said, where's the air conditioning? He said, I said, you have a big sign, air conditioning. He says, that's only in the lobby. And I'm like, well, can I bring my bed to the lobby? I'm never going to be able to sleep here. That's why everybody was just sitting there like lumps in the locker.
because it was air conditioned, right?
Yes. So now you got to understand, it was just Myron and I, and Taki's the agent. He left, and now we're gonna go downstairs and get drunk and have dinner. And I mean, we were tired also because it was, our day of travel. Well, we go downstairs and the bar is closed. I'm like, what the hell is? They said, oh, we have a big party. There's a wedding taking place tonight in the hotel because evidently it was the fanciest hotel in that part of Castoria. So we're like dying. We just wanted something to drink. It was so hot. I didn't even know how to go, like, to a restaurant or whatever it was. And we were beat. We didn't want to go out. Anyway, we decide we're going to go downstairs to where the restaurant was and just see if we could, like, sort of finagle something. Well, as it turns out, we are introduced to the family that is having the wedding. And they were very eager to talk to Americans. And all I can tell you is in 15 minutes, Myron and I were both invited to the wedding. Now, we did not go to the wedding. We did have drinks, though. I mean, we partook in the cocktail hour and pre-cocktail hour with them. And it was just, we had enough. It was like we went upstairs, we're going to start fresh tomorrow, and, we're going to go to sleep. Meanwhile, I go up to my room, and like I say, I took the guy's advice. I left the louvers open.
Oh, gross. It's gonna smell like shit when you come back.
Oh, it was worse than that. There was a spider in the corner of the window that was literally the size, the body was the size of a tennis ball. Now, needless to say, I didn't think I was going to sleep anyway because it was too hot.
And now you're up on guard all night, all week.
Oh, if it wasn't for Myron, I think, because I'm scared of that shit. And I called Myron. I said, could you come into my room for a second? I just want you to see something. I said,
I'm the senior buyer. Could you come over here, please?
yeah, there's a couple of things I need to review by the window. And he comes in, he goes, holy shit. And then he either took a towel or something and like started smacking it and it left. I mean, it went out the window, closed the louvers, and I said, okay, I'm safe. I looked everywhere, making sure that there wasn't a family of spiders already, inhabiting my room, and everything was fine. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna take a cold shower and go to bed.
Do you
Simple as that.
remember where it was now?
Well, P.S. There was a medicine cabinet, and for some reason, I opened the medicine
Oh,
cabinet.
schmuck, yeah.
And do you remember I don't know, it had to be in the 60s, maybe 70s, there was a commercial for Right Guard where the guy would open up his medicine cabinet and go to reach for the Right Guard, and somebody was in there, on the other side of it. And he would go, hi, guy. Well, I opened up the medicine cabinet. Of course, there was nothing in there, but there were louvers. And I open up the louvers, and it looks right into the next room.
Whoa.
Well, I learned because every couple of hours I would get up, take a cold shower, and try and cool my body down and try and go to sleep. And I get up, and I had left the thing open. It was the honeymoon couple. It was my new friends. And they're like the show. I'm like the Right Guard commercial. I'm like, hi, guy. And I just slowly closed the louvers so that they didn't hear. And then every time I got up to take a shower, I would open to see what was going on. But it was luckily, Myron was very efficient, very efficient. We got through, I think we only spent like 3 days in Castoria, and we're able to buy enough fur plates so that, I shipped them on to Hong Kong, And here's the best. Myron flew home from there, and I flew on to Hong Kong. You know what happened?
What's here?
The plates were detained. They were lost. They couldn't find them. It went from Castoria, Greece, to Athens, Greece, and then like England, to the UK, and then to Hong Kong. It wasn't on, I was on 3 different flights. So it wasn't on the same plane as me. It wasn't transferred. It was sent as freight. I get to Hong Kong. We didn't have the plates for like a week. Finally, they got delivered. Our freight forwarder was able to get everything out, and they got delivered. But it was quite an eventful trip that we had. And then again,
God.
yeah, that's what got us. That's what got us out of getting the plates, getting the production. And then I told you the story when production was started. They were horrible. They were scary. They did not look like that cute little rare bear that that the prototype was.
But, to take Jeffrey's position, I wasn't sniping his position. I wasn't campaigning for his position. I wasn't, there was, I wasn't after his job. Jeffrey,
Somehow he got that from somewhere though.
well, he got the job from being David Meltzer's
No.
son.
I mean, he got that people in Chicago were looking to move him out once he was there for a while.
Well,
And
I'll
then
tell
you
you
heard the
what.
story that last story that he told, right, about the thing with the coats and waking the people up in the middle of the night. And
Look, Larry Becker was more qualified for the job that I was in than I was. There's no question. Having said that, I did a damn good job. There was one specific incident that I was at Woodan in Korea. Remember them? They were a Fox manufacturer. They were an important manufacturer for us.
Yeah, again, you know what? And like you reminded me, you got me thinking about this stuff the way that you have felt bad for 40 years thinking about having to replace Larry Friedman.
yep.
I never felt bad about that. I never had any reason to feel bad about replacing Jeff. Jeff was not well suited for that position. In my opinion, Jeff probably would have made a great CEO or CFO or president of the company. Somebody that would be more behind the scenes orchestrating things than being the guy that is in front of the scenes.
Where does he get this idea in his head that you took the job? Yeah, you wanted that job and took it from him. I mean, it came from
On,
somewhere.
Honestly, I think that's something that is in his head because that was never certainly in my intent. I never campaigned for that position. You know what I mean? It was the fact is Jeffrey was not well suited for that position. Something I've learned from our podcasts, like I've had a really fun time in my tenure with Evans and in the fur industry. However, it was hard work and it was about building relationships. You know,
We were doing an inspection of pieced goods. I think they were Fox jackets. And there were so many bad seams on these plates that there were holes in the jackets. And I refused to pass the inspection because I knew that when they got to Chicago, they would just have to go up to our factory floor and get it repaired, and a big chunk of them. And having been on the sales floor and having been in the factory, doing, not working in the factory, obviously, but being there, I knew that I could not accept this this delivery of goods. But we had a meeting for PETA the next day in Hong Kong. And so I couldn't extend my trip and just say, let's just fix them and we'll go on. Wodan was a manufacturer that had people living on the grounds in a building. And so I had them bring people back at night. I said, I'll work with you all night. I'll stay here. But I literally had an entire shipment repaired at night so that I could get on a plane back to Hong Kong, because I was leading, as the Evans representative, I was leading the meeting for PETA. And that came back to folks in Chicago. And instead of being praised for having done the right thing, that was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of my being there. And I had been getting sniped at, again, by the folks, by Larry and a couple of other people in the Chicago office. And so he flew me back, wouldn't tell me why, told my mother, and my mother told him, absolutely do not do this. And he did, and he fired me at dinner. He took me to the Standard Club for lunch and fired me at lunch at the Standard Club.
Let's go to this overlap, okay? So Jeffrey's told this story about pulling people out of bed in Korea in the middle of the night to get an order ready that the plates all had holes in them and everything, which I'm sure was commonplace over there. But is there an overlap here with the same time that there's that story about you and the Care Bears, and then they sent you to that, and were they doing that, sending you instead of Jeffrey, because that would have been Jeffrey's thing? Like, just give me a little bit of insight there, and if there's any overlap or missing something, or if they're unrelated or what.
Well, it really is sort of unrelated now that I
Okay.
think of it, because the Rare Bears, that was all started. Tommy and I were in that. I think Jeffrey may have stepped right into the middle of that. And again, that was one of the reasons that maybe they thought of me, was because I was in their vision. You know what I mean? I was the guy that was in Hong Kong, and to tell you the truth, I was integral in getting that problem solved. Otherwise, May Company was going to sue us.
Right.
But yeah, so it really, like I say, I had no intent. I had no idea. To tell you the truth, I don't know if I felt excited about it or nervous about it. I was 30 years old. My kids were, 5 and 3, and I'm going to move them to another country. But again, the money helps. It
Yeah.
really does
So
help.
so let me ask you this. So where are you when you hear that Jeffrey has been brought back to Chicago and let go? And then give us the timeline of then you're turning into the guy there.
Oh, that was fast. I mean, they basically sent Jeff home. I mean, and I don't know that he even knew why he was going home. Again, that's why I need him to know I wasn't privy to, any of the decision-making process in that. I really only learned that I was going, they were asking me to go to Hong Kong after he was already fired.
Okay, so
You
it
know,
wasn't like where I was given Larry Friedman's job, and then he was still in the job, and I'm sent down to help get while they get rid of him and walk in and take over. So you're a different situation than I was.
yeah, and oh, absolutely. That's what I'm saying right from the start. I don't feel, I don't have that same feeling as you. I'm sorry that he does, but like I say, he's carrying something that really, I mean, I guess he felt he lived, but I was not, I was not behind him with a knife.
Okay.
If any,
Okay. So then, when's the first you hear about the job? Who tells you about it? Tell us how that all evolves. And then, like you said, it's quick. So then, how quick are you like being thrown into the Far East?
well, it was okay. So I was in a cab with Barry Novick,
In Chicago
and
or New York?
this was in New York.
Okay.
No, Chicago. It was in Chicago. Wait a second. No, you know where it was? It was in Hong Kong because it was pretty quick that, not that I was living there, but we made a trip to Hong Kong.
So is this
And
before you have the job?
before I have the job, it was
So
when,
Jeffrey's been fired, and you and Barry and
no, Jeff, I
no.
think at that point, Jeffrey was still in charge.
Okay. All
And,
right. So yeah.
and
So just finish that, and then lead me to where you end up taking this job from him. I don't mean you're taking it, but I
okay.
mean he's gone and you're being hired.
Well, no, he was still there. And we were going, gosh, I can still remember. It was the Cleveland restaurant, all going to meet for dinner. And I'm sitting in the cab. Barry's wife was in the cab also. And Barry turns to me and he says, God, what do you think of Hong Kong? I says, I love it. And he goes, take a good look around. And 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 honestly, I swear to God, I did not know what he meant by that. So they were already brewing Jeffrey's removal
Right.
before I had any idea. However, once Jeffrey was out, was sent back, all of a sudden I'm picking out the curtains in his apartment for my family. So it was pretty quick. I would say within probably 5 6 weeks, I had to sell my house. Well, I actually put it up for sale. It didn't sell right away, but I guess it was about 5 6 weeks before I was there.
Okay. So
And
what? So now give me what year we're in, and just remind everybody again, and then tell us about a little bit about moving your family to the Far East, and then getting started in the job, and then we'll get into some of the things that transpired there.
okay, so the year was 1989, and Evans made it really easy for me to move my family. You know what I mean? I stepped into, there was a lease signed for like 3 years. Well, 2 years at least, because I lived there 2 years. And I don't think Andrea ever moved there. So maybe it was a 3-year lease. And it was beautiful. I mean, it was like living in the lap of luxury, which it really was. I mean, Hong Kong had no middle class where
Right.
we belonged. It was poverty and wealth. And like I say, Evans made it very easy for my family to be there and be comfortable, and with drivers and maids. And, I didn't want the driver, I wanted the car. uh, but I mean, like I say, it was a very, very comfortable lifestyle. And to tell you the truth, for me, the best part about having that position, and I thank Jeffrey every day for it, was that I didn't have to travel that crazy travel schedule that I was doing. And I had
Yep.
two little boys. My kids were 5 and 3. And it was like I was able to be a coach of the little league or the basketball. They asked me not to be soccer. I didn't understand the game, but but it was like it was a great lifestyle for me. That's
So
again.
where go ahead, finish up.
I don't know where I was going.
Okay, so where's the company at this point? Like, are things starting to be difficult, or are we still just buying away, and we're still like at the top of the peak and haven't started tumbling yet? Like,
In
where?
I would say in 1989, we were on the start of decline. but we were Evans, and our motto was to build, and grow. So it's certainly, when I moved over, I think that we were exporting about $18 million
Did you start having
between.
any constraints from Pat Regan or anybody in finance about what was being spent or how much, or like was there a change in being able to get access to the goods that we needed to make the sales? From the
um
company's standpoint, I mean, from our standpoint, like we've got to cut down because things are starting to decline, or because, and I'll
well,
tell you why I ask.
that
I'll tell you
was
why I ask. Let me tell you why I asked that. Because Pat Reagan talks about at this point that we were starting to have some issues accessing credit lines,
money.
and that's when he yeah that's when
When we got into 88, 89, we had no way of running a business because you'll recall, other than the apparel, everything was highly seasonal. We didn't really sell furs until maybe October. So that stretch that you have between January and October, you're trying to buy furs, market for it, but you have no money to do it. So,
So tell me on the financial end now, what kind of magic has to be worked? You're talking 89, and the thing goes on for another 10 years after this.
but he came up with that idea, which happened to work. It was a cockamamie idea that happened to work. That we got to ask for the storage receipts up front to save our ass to have enough money to fund the
I
business,
don't think
which
that
we did, and it worked.
I don't think that was cockamamie. I think that was brilliant.
No, it was brilliant, and it's the standard. It's the standard now too. But
so what happened is I came up with this goofy idea and a lot of people resisted this. We had the storage season coming up, right? And I said, we have to ask people to pay when they bring their furs out. We can't wait. We can't accept their product and say, oh, pay me when you think you want to come and get your fur. And everybody said, you can't do that. I go, guess what? We're going to have to. We have no money.
And
No.
what did that 6-month difference mean to you on your end?
In terms of what?
In terms of getting the money 6 months earlier.
Oh, it saved the company. Without it, we would have gone bankrupt. So, I mean, I remember Irv Carm.
Sure.
He was the operations guy. Barry Novick.
Yep.
When I came up with this idea, they said, you can't do that. I said, and the analogy they came up is, well, you take your dry cleaning and you don't pay up front. I go, that's true, but I don't store it for 6 months. You have to ask people to pay for the service, which is the storage. And then we created this program. If the store got 75% of all the people who brought their coats in, you could get a pool of money shared by everybody who worked in fur department. And in the first month, I think the first week, we tracked this weekly. In the first week, we got to 80%. And I said, okay, we're going to make the pot bigger now. And we got, I think by the end of the year, we probably on average, we got 92%. Without that money, we would have had no money. Plus, you're trying to run the apparel business, which was okay. I mean, Evans was never really known outside Chicago for apparel, even though we had it for a while, I think in Washington.
Yep.
Remember that?
Yep.
So that was the first challenge.
but I guess my question is: are you feeling any impact financially on the buying end, which helps constrain you and your job and getting the job done, or is it still all guns?
My
and
job,
guns?
you know what? My job was not at that point. I had already left the merchandising part of the business. So my job was not determining how much we should or could or cannot buy. My job was finding the best values out there for manufacturing and making sure that, the biggest part of my job at that point was quality control, making sure that what we bought, what everybody felt that we were, that's what we need and we can sell that and make money, that's what we were getting. And that's why we needed eyes in Hong Kong, or in Korea, because sometimes they'd fool you a little bit or try to.
Right.
And again, I never saw any of the financial um, restraints. Not in 1989, not in 1990, not pretty much throughout the whole time that I was there as the director of the overseas office, which was 2 years. I didn't see that because Hong Kong required Red Claws LCs at that time, for the purchasing. So your money was already
It's
guaranteed for
spent.
that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So that leads to my next question, which you pretty much just answered, which is, since there's Stuart, Tommy, Jeffrey, you, there's four of you in about 6 years. None of these vendors are saying anything or voicing any concern about, maybe we're kind of unstable as a company and an organization,
Um,
or they just keep accepting the next guy who comes over and it's business as usual.
Remember, we had the biggest pencil in the industry.
Okay.
So, I mean, they're going to accept it. I will tell you one thing though. It's the vendors. Again, that position is about relationships and building relationships. You know the story with Jeff in Korea with the manufacturers? It's like the difference is that he's coming in not knowing the mechanics of what can and cannot be done and has to be done, and saying you need to do this. I moved into Hong Kong into that position and I said, I don't know how to read a pattern. Can you help me? Or not read a pattern that I did know, but that was because of Roland. But it's like I didn't really understand the manufacturing part. I was never involved in that, even though that's what my dad and grandfather did before me in the industry. That was never taking my clothes off, putting on an apron, and sitting at a sewing machine. Never was of interest to me. But in that position, I had to learn it because I had to then be able to figure out, you know, what could and could not be done and should not be done. So it was all about building trust and relationship. It was the manufacturers, I'm sure, that I don't want to say pushed, but advised Stuart and Tommy, and I know they did to me too. And said when, I mean, with me, like I say, I returned with Evans and that's a whole different story for another podcast, how I left and started my own business.
Excuse me. Now you're there and you've got your family moved and everything. And just tell me what's about the hecticness and the pace and the craziness of this position, and then sort of take me through how long were you there for? 2 years, 2.5 years?
2 years. 2 years.
2 years. So to kind of take us through the arc of how that 2 years went for you, and then what and when did you start to notice changes that ended up with your being back in New York?
Well, no, I had a contract for 2 years, so I
Okay.
assumed that I was going back to Chicago, not New
Okay,
York.
but why wouldn't they want somebody there still after the 2 years?
Yeah, but I wasn't sure. I mean, I had the ability at that point too to say that I don't want to stay there.
Right, right, right. Did
I mean, there
somebody
would
go
have.
there after you?
Did somebody go there after me? No. You
Okay,
know who
so
went there? Do you know who went there after me?
who?
Me. For
Okay,
Evans was me
okay.
because
So that's kind of what I want to get into is in your 2 year arc, somewhere in your 2 year arc, the company is deciding not to renew your contract after the end of the 2 years, or to insist
not
that
at
we need
all.
you to wait, just tell me where I'm wrong. Let me ask the question and tell me where I'm wrong. To insist
Because
that
they
we need you to stay there and continue this on, and versus shutting everything down, because this also coincides with the time where Pat Regan is saying things are starting to get so bad that we can't maintain things like having this house in Hong Kong and having the place in the Essex House and having Harold Sussman's house and having David's planes and blah 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 blah.
Pat Regan, who was the president at the time, would get on the phone and would try to convince, his best. We're gonna send you a check now for, blah blah blah. And it's the first of many payments to come. And you're gonna get yourself out of it. We're gonna get ourselves out of this. And we look forward to doing much more. But he did his best. He really did his best to make it all go forward. But the writing was on the wall.
We brought in all the major accounts. and we said, we can't pay you right now. And this is what we'll do. We'll start paying you once a month for 6 months. And anything we buy from you, we're going to pay you in 90 days. It was unheard of. I mean, but what was everybody going to do? And most people just said, okay. And I sat down with all. Bob was there with me, Sark Arbor. What?
They needed us.
Oh, yeah. So, but one of the things I did, I said, you know, I'm not going to go into these meetings and ask these guys to wait for their money and us still getting paid. So what I did is I came up with that salary reduction plan, whereby I think Bob and myself took like a 20% pay cut. And as you went down further into the organization, the pay cuts were lower percents. I think even store managers took like a 5% hit. And I said, I have to demonstrate to these people that we're going to do some heavy lifting here ourselves. So I thought that gave us a lot of credibility, and actually we pulled it out. I don't know how we did.
By the time that my contract was up, yes, that was definitely evident and a concern, you know, that especially for me, because now I had to return to the United States to get my 2 years pay, you know, my 2 extra years pay.
Right.
And again, I must say that even through the hardest times, they were compassionate. Everybody in the management was compassionate, because now they asked me, and I mean, it wasn't like they didn't want to renew my contract in Hong Kong. They were closing the office. They moved me to New York, and I'm going to be responsible for Hong Kong.
Right,
They
right. But what
take
I'm
the
saying, but part of what I'm saying is that that was a financial decision, not a not the right business or operation decision. So there's a
yeah,
cause and
but the
effect
way
that makes that happen, and then there's the cause and effect of actually doing it, and how much harder the job was after you are trying to do it from New York, right?
Well, not for nothing. You're 100% right. But I wasn't concerned. I was 32 years old and looking at it like the Jewish Godfather move. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. You know, I'm going to be the vice president
Right.
of Evans, New York. And it was like, you know, I again, it was evident that money was a problem. Business was a problem. You know, it
But we're still buying millions of dollars worth of stuff. You know, you may be going from 20 to 18 million, but you're still buying 18 or 17 or 15 million dollars worth of shit over there, right?
Yeah, and again, everybody got very, very clever in coming up. You know, the reason that we were the biggest, you know, we grew the call it the New York fur market, was because we paid and we paid within 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days, and we offered anticipation. If we paid early, you know, it would
Right.
be less of a price. We went from, you know, paying on receipt to 30 days to we'll pay you if we can, sort of.
Right, right. So does that then make it difficult acquiring goods? Are we getting to that point, and then people starting to
Well,
wonder when I'm getting paid? And
it made it quite a bit more obvious when I did move to New York. And I didn't want to move to New York. At that point, I already said, I'm watching this all happen. I mean, I was blessed to be in the spot that I was in
Mhm.
because this was my career. And now everything is going from Hong Kong into China. And just like Evans were pioneers in the Far East, I'm now representing Evans as that pioneer that's going into China. You know what I mean? So I didn't want to go back to the US. I really didn't. Uh, I knew at that point I wanted to stay there. It wasn't evident to me really until I get to New York and we're buying the same product that we were I'll say manufacturing. I mean, we were buying it firsthand. You know, we were given the patterns. The manufacturers were making it. We were shipping it, cutting out every middleman. right? But again, for that privilege, you had to also pay a Red Clause LC, and your money was tied up for whatever, time that production took. Now I go to New York and we're buying the same stuff, only ours was much nicer. Theirs is twice the money. And the reason that we were doing it is because they would give us terms. And it went from 30, 60, 90 to 180. And then people that really wanted to do business and they were sort of like, friends of the company, they would, because we had the doors to sell from. You know what I mean? That's why you can't just close a $180 million business. You know what I mean? It's going to be sold to Perker Christensen or Lenny Tax. You have to preserve it for that.
Okay, so were you involved in, you know, Pat and Sharon and Jimmy and everybody in the buying end talks about at some point these conversations from the vendor about, hey, when are we going to get paid? So if you're 30 and 60 and 90 is now at 180 and 250 days, like is part of your job start becoming playing firefighter, or are you able to just hand that off to somebody?
I wasn't really part of that. They did this chess game playing where they took me from Hong Kong, put me in New York. They took the guys from New York, the buyers, and put them into Chicago. Now here I was. This was also one of the reasons why I was happy being in Hong Kong. Now they put me in New York, but I'm responsible for Hong Kong. So I'm traveling again. And basically, like I say, I noticed that something's wrong when we're buying 75022JY25 from Grecophilia for $3,000. And yes, it had an Adolfo label. And sometimes it was spelled wrong because they were put on in Hong Kong. Um, it bothered me. And I knew that we can buy these for $1,100 and they're going to be better, but we didn't have the $1,100.
Right.
But again, the more we talk, I think maybe I was the Peter and the Peter principle because they took me from Chicago, put me in Hong Kong, away from everybody. They take me from Hong Kong, put me in New York, away from everybody. You know what I mean? It was like
Yeah, but it's a little. I think it's a little more complex than that because, like I said, some of it's driven by finances. So, okay, so what about the quality control of the goods? You start to notice the difference in the quality. Forgetting that pricing stuff, but just on like goods and similar goods at similar prices and whatnot. You start to see that because you're not there 100% of the time, the that's being affected, and you see the whole reason that we had somebody over there in the first place?
you're talking about. No, we were there. I
No, no,
mean,
what you right, but you weren't there as often as you had been before, were you?
no, but you try and schedule your, deliveries so that you can be, doing it. We were
Okay,
inspecting
so
the goods.
somehow you're dancing around it, and still your quality control is okay, aside from the fact that we're
In
buying
Hong
expensive
Kong,
shit we shouldn't be buying.
I can tell you in Hong Kong, we didn't have a problem. We were the most respected company in the industry. And again, keeps going back to the fact that they were paid up front. You know what I mean? There were several times that merchandise was shipped. It was unacceptable. It went back. And it was repaired on their dime, not ours. But I will tell you, it was the ultimate reason that I asked to leave the company was because here I am in New York, and I always valued my job as being the inspector. That was the last thing that I needed to do. It was like from soup to nuts, but the inspection meant everything. And I would go into an inspection, and I would go, guys, I can't ship this. I says, this is, you got to fix this, you got to fix this, you got to fix this. Again, I didn't tell them they had to stay there and not go to their kid's christening. But, you know, the bottom line is that I would go there. I'd say, just do the finishing work, do something. and I'll come back and I'll ship it, I'll inspect it. And I would come back and it was shipped. And I'm going, I told you not to. Oh, we called Jimmy or we called Sharon. And I mean, maybe they needed the merchandise or, for an ad or
So
whatever.
a lot of that is some of the same stuff that Jeffrey went through, just so that you were all getting that kind of shit fairly, just to be fair to everybody
Well,
in that
again,
regard. Like everybody's working around you guys who are there to kind of avoid the whole purpose of having you there because they just want the shit shipped and to go cash in their LC, right?
exactly. But that was the job description. And again, what you're trying to do is build a relationship so that those people want to help you. Simple as that. They're helping themselves, of course, but they also want to help you do your job. And
Sure.
that's what I'm saying. To go back to before, Stuart, Tommy, myself, we were all helped by the manufacturers once we announced, we're in business on our own. We were all helped by them because they knew us, trusted us. And again, to them, it was another customer to build.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they weren't losing the first one. But I
Right,
guess
right, right, right.
in my case,
That's a
I
good point.
took Evans with me. That's how I left. I left as an employee of Evans and ended up being their
An
exclusive
agent, right.
agent. You
So
know what
so
I mean?
let's back up a little bit and walk us towards that. So you end up back in the States and what's the timeline and what precipitates you deciding that it's time for you to fly and then to go back there and do that?
It was 8 months that I lived there. My wife was
Lived
totally
where?
in New York,
Okay.
and again, from that post that I was covering at that point, I was back to traveling again. At least when we lived in Chicago, she had family there, so there was a support team. I had two young kids. And again, I found myself traveling again. So, and I was again unhappy. I felt like I was a glorified inspection agent that didn't mean shit. I mean, my word didn't mean anything. If you're not going to give me teeth, uh, just ship it then. You know what I
And
mean?
then, and
That's
then,
not
and also at this time, we're doing more. We've talked about this in the other podcasts and in the films. We're doing more and more of the buying by report proxy and not by furriers.
exactly. But again, that part too. I saw that there's a lot of mistakes being made because things are being done by rote, not, nothing else. There were a lot of mistakes, but that wasn't my job. My job was to deliver to them what they wanted at the best price, and the best value. And I mean, of course, I would put my 2 cents in and say, why are we ordering this? We haven't sold these in 6, 7 years. Oh, we sold 12 of them. Yeah, that was the lost leader in an ad.
Right.
It was marked down to sell for 1,000, but they originally cost 3,000. So now, I mean, it was like that was the people running the car. I remember, I liked the guy too. He was a nice guy, Eric Sachs. He
Yep.
really was. He wasn't. I mean, he was a decent person. He knew nothing, zero about the fur business, zero. And all of a sudden, he's the one that's guiding us. It sort of made no sense to me. And
Okay,
there were a lot
but
of
we'd set that wheel in motion by then with others. So I guess the question then begs, um, did that make your job any harder, having all these non-fur people and apparel people that
from
that looked at things from a ready-to-wear standpoint and not from the way we did it?
well, honestly, when I moved to Hong Kong the first time, when I moved as for Evans, it was still run, it was still controlled pretty much by the fur people. The consultant that came in and Levy, they're all gone by that point. You know
Yo,
what I
Lost
mean? It was
knows they're all gone, right?
right. It was really after I moved back to Hong Kong on my own that it became, I mean, I noticed that I saw that it became, it was like color by number, paint by number, instead of, what it should have been, because they were just looking at reports and not really merchandising anymore. It was just buying. And again, I wasn't part of that team, so I don't know what they were forced to do. You know
Right,
what
but
I mean?
you saw the end result, the result of it on your end in what's being bought and what you're inspecting and what you're shipping back over.
Well, and then, I mean, in all fairness, when that team was in place, I mean, again, I don't know the players other than Sharon, Sharon Bass, that were actually running the fur business. And I thought that at least Sharon, she picked it up quick, and she had the personality to be able to, you know, keep people together. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Even if she didn't, know what the difference between a step down and a let out or a male and female mink was, she had Jimmy and Charlie and Myron around her. You know what I mean? She was great at building a team. In all fairness, I didn't know a lot anybody after 1991. Oh, it was 92 when I started PBS. Um, I didn't know any of the management players, other than the original ones. But I saw what was happening number wise. You know what
Okay,
I
so
mean? But
I sidetracked you. So let's go back to New York and lead us to why you decided it was time to go. Other than you're just a glorified inspector, or was that the main reason? Like it's
well, like I say, when I left Hong Kong, I sort of left kicking and screaming because I wanted to stay. I saw that this was the business. This was the future of the business. Everything was that now became, the hub, the metropolis. And New York, when New York starts buying all of their products, New York used to be the epicenter of the fur industry for the world. And then Greece, they started bringing stuff from Greece. Now everything was from Hong Kong and China, and the only thing that you made in New York were the boxes, or the boxes to ship the stuff to Hong Kong, to ship your skins. It was a whole different ball game, and I just left that. You know what I mean? It was like at 32 years old, I wanted to take advantage of that. And
hmm.
again, I guess I had, I don't want to say the vision because my visions were different, but I had, I guess, the experience of seeing that, oh, Stuart left, he was successful. Tommy left, and he was successful. I knew that I had, in the 2 years, built relationship that I could be successful too. And again, I started by literally getting on a plane because everything was my family was unhappy, I was unhappy. It was like I was traveling too much, and I was ready for my own business.
So are you
And
there? Are you there when they decide to close the New York office and move everybody back to Chicago?
no, I didn't even know that that happened. I mean, I left the New York office. Yeah,
Yeah, at a certain
nobody,
point, they closed the New
nobody,
York office, and
yeah,
Jimmy and
nobody,
Myron and Charlie,
nobody.
everybody moved back to Chicago.
They were already in Chicago.
Oh, they were already in Chicago. Okay, then I got my
Yeah,
timeline
that's
wrong.
what I'm
Okay,
saying. I was in New
okay,
York, me, Vinny Caputo, and Lil.
okay.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It was sort of a joke. To
All
me
right,
it
so
was
tell me,
anyway.
so now take me up to the end and tell us about when you decide to leave and who you go and talk to about that. And I'm sure they tried to talk you out of it and all that fun stuff.
No, they didn't
No, okay,
because
okay, because things
oh
are so
no,
desperate at that time. We need the money.
no, well, no, I had a plan that everybody benefited. They still had a Hong Kong office, but you had Lawrence Chang, who eventually became my partner in PBS, and Margaret, who was the office person, and Joni, who no, Margaret was already in Chicago. Evans helped her. David Meltzer and Robert helped her to emigrate to the United States with her family. And it was just Lawrence, Joni, and there may have been somebody else at the time. It may have just been Lawrence and Joni. And then, like I say, I would come over from New York. They would have everything ready for inspection, and I would come in and be doing the inspections with them, and signing off the LCs. Um, so they still were paying them a salary. They were paying me to basically sit there like a putz, and I didn't want to do that. So I was unannounced. I got on a plane and I went in to Robert. It was
So
Robert,
wait, hold on. So you unannounced, you got on a plane and went to where? Chicago?
Chicago.
Okay, and slow this down.
Sat
This gets interesting, so go slow.
sat down with Robert,
Okay,
Sam Garber, and Pat Regan.
okay.
And I said to them,
When are we now, please? 91, 92?
this is between 91 and 92, because 92 I started PBS.
Okay, okay. All
Okay,
right, so you got
so,
Garber and Pat Regan and Robert Meltzer, and tell me how this meeting goes.
and I said to them, I said, guys, I am really unhappy that, I'm sitting here in a position that is meaningless. And it was after like stuff was being shipped, after I said no, and they said, "Oh, I spoke to Chicago. It's okay." I was like, "Okay." I mean, I wanted to protect my job.
Yeah, of course.
If they didn't need me there, I didn't want to be sitting with my hand, So I said, "I'm really unhappy." I said, "I want to go back to Hong Kong," and I said, "I don't want to go back every 6 weeks, like you guys are sending me." I said, I want to go back. I see my future there. And I said, I have a plan. I said, I've been with you guys for 16 years. Evidently, you like my service. I said, I want to open up a buying office. That's my plan. I'm going to open up a buying office and let me become your buyer, which is basically what I'm doing. Not buyer, but inspector. I was their insurance policy. And everybody looked at me, and I think Pat was the one that right away I could see the light bulb
Well, because
going
he's
off.
seeing whatever that lovely salary of yours is being saved,
Not
and only
only,
having to
not only, not only mine, because they were getting ready to close whatever was left in the Hong Kong office.
right,
In
right,
order to do,
which he told us when we spoke to him, right?
yeah, and in order to do so, they had in Hong Kong, the law requires that you pay like X amount of months for every year served. And it would have been, again, a lot of cash. Not that they were making a lot of money, but they had been there a while. And it was just cash was needed to pay rent, not even buy merchandise.
Sure.
It was, at that point. So I said to them, I says, look, if I will give you, I charge them 2%. Everybody else was paying me between 3 and 5, and mostly 5, because the bigger they were, the less they paid. And I said, I'll charge you 2%, but I need a guarantee of $6 million, because I figured that it cost me 120 grand to run the office. So they agreed. Everybody agreed. And I
Okay, let me ask
went
you a
back.
question here. So, do you have, again, this is at a time when the company is starting to hit the skids financially. So, even though they tell you that they're going to do that and they want to do that, are you having any trepidations that they will be able to fulfill that end of the bargain, or are things still good enough then at that point that you can feel relatively safe in that assumption?
Well, again, I was exclusive to them. They weren't exclusive to me. So I was getting other customers.
No, I understand that, but you needed, like, without them, that wouldn't have been, it would have been much harder,
Well,
to
let
get
me.
that business going. Or could you have done it at all without them? But so
I don't know that I would have had the intestinal fortitude
right, right. So
to
that's why I'm saying.
to
So
do
I
it
come
without
back
them.
to, were you concerned about their capability to fulfill that end of making sure that you get $6 million in sales to commission on out of this?
Yes, but it was the lesser of the evils to me because I was earning a lot more than that in New York, doing nothing. Now I had the opportunity to really work for them, give them a benefit, and work for 27 other people. I mean, it didn't start like that, but I had 27 other customers when I was working that business. And like I say, that's why I knew that that was the business for me. It's being an agent. And everybody at that table agreed and benefited, from that deal. You know what I'm saying? Everybody was happy. I was happy to go back to Hong Kong, have my own business. Pat Regan was able to take some dollars and keep them on this side. Robert, was everybody was happy. Sam Garber was writing up a contract, and I was on a plane back home that night, and already starting my, call it, sojourn to Hong Kong. I go into the New York office. That was a Thursday. I go into the New York office on Friday, and like I used to take the train in from Dix Hills. It was like an hour and 20-minute drive, and sometimes it would get me there at 8:45. Sometimes it would get me there at 9. This morning, what's the Sandy Parker report came out on Friday, and I go into the office at 3:45. Was it
Hold on
3:45?
one second. For those watching that don't know, Sandy Parker Reports was a fur industry trade rag that came out weekly, and he was the guy with his thumb on the pulse of the industry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, so it was reported that Larry Becker left Evans and is starting his own buying agency in Hong Kong.
How did that happen so quickly?
I let them know.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I was gonna say somebody obviously leaked it, so
Yeah.
then it
Oh
was
no,
you.
it was
Okay,
me. It was
okay.
me. When I got up to the office, I got out of the elevator. Every freaking vendor that we were doing business with was waiting there. It was so that I could become their agent because they knew. Now I was the guy that was telling them, I can't ship that. I mean, I can't ship that. They knew that they wanted somebody like me to be the guy on the other end. You know what I'm saying? So it was
Mm-hmm.
like, again, it's a complete circle. Evans threw me all around. They exposed me to everything, and then threw me back into the circle, threw me out, threw me back in, and everything stuck with me. I was blessed, and I was able to run my business for as long as I wanted to, which was 1996, because 1997 was a little scary for me because I'm watching all of my friends, my Hong Kongese friends, getting their families, their money, everything out of Hong Kong.
Right, for the
Not no,
turnover, right?
not knowing what to expect when it was now Chinese rule instead of
British. Yep,
British rule.
yep.
And I mean, I said, okay, I had a 5-year plan. When I started PBS, I brought Lawrence in as a partner because over the couple of years that I worked with this guy, I realized that he was a hardworking, integral part of that business and somebody I could trust. So and he was not compensated the way that the Americans that went over there were compensated, by Evans. So he didn't have to think when I said to him, here's what I'm suggesting. You're going to have 20% of the business right off the bat. Every year I'm going to give you 5% of the business until you're a 50% partner. Because at that point, I'm getting my family back to the United States. Mathematically, everything worked. My kids were now going to be in high school, and I wanted them to prepare. Well, Jamie actually left Hong Kong in high school. I wanted them to prepare to go to school, to university in the States. So I had 1997, I had the kids' age, and it was time. That was my plan. So Lawrence jumped at it. The first check, I'll never forget. We used to take expenses every month against what we were making. But the first check at the end of the year I wrote him was for $1 million, albeit Hong Kong, but it was $1 million. It felt pretty good to do that. It was still
All right, let me
120.
so let me ask you this. Let's talk about now those those 4 years and change that you're on your own in Hong Kong in relation to Evans. So what's it like dealing with Evans during this time? Is everything copacetic at the beginning? When do you start to notice a change? Because between 92 and 96, that's a big time frame change in this company for things getting more and more difficult to operate.
No question. But something. In all fairness, I signed in 92. I signed an agreement with them guaranteeing me $6 million in business. The first year they did like 8 million, and it was all paid for. The next year they did maybe 7 million. Then they took. This is a great story, but maybe for another one, another time slot. But they had been in Hong Kong on a trip. Sharon, Jimmy, Myron, Charlie. Okay, they were in Hong Kong for a trip, normal buying trip. I think we wrote probably close to $2 million worth of business. And they were getting ready to go home. We had dinner, a dinner together. They were leaving early the next morning. And I get a call from Sharon maybe an hour after I got home from dinner. And she says, "We're staying. We're not leaving in the morning. We're staying. I need you to meet me, to meet us at the Shangri-La Hotel for breakfast." I said, "All right." It was always a good, there was always good food around that group. So I meet them for breakfast. And the first thing I'm handed is an NDA. And I look at it, and they were taking over Marshall Fields. And was it Marshall Fields and Saks?
Bloomies.
Oh, Bloomingdale's. And that 2 million that they placed needed somehow, some way. Again, I was out of the loop with the financial point, the financial side, especially at that time. But somehow, some way, they were able to find the money or the ability to negotiate that deal, and found the money, and it now went from 2 million to about 3.5 million overnight. You know what I mean? It was good. And that gave you the confidence. The NDA was because I still had Evans stock.
Right.
So I could not, on that, on that, with that information, I could not advise anybody else, and I couldn't purchase stock for a certain period of time. But at that point, there was no reason, certainly from where I was sitting, to see that there was it seemed as if the financial problem was getting better. You know what I mean? Because again, I
Did that
wasn't.
start to change at all at a certain point? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not this way your whole time in Hong Kong, those 4 years, is it?
No. At the end, they were looking for terms in Hong Kong, and it was pretty much, you know, not ever recognized. To have
Well, not
time.
not only that, but from your standpoint, you're an agent now, right? So you can't have this client dragging down your relationships with these vendors that you need for your other clients.
100%. 100%. But again, they, there were a couple of companies again that were major supporters of Evans over the years. Evans built their companies, or helped to build their companies with the support that we gave. So there were people that were willing. Look, the New Yorkers that ended up putting the business down, they were the biggest supporters at one time, from the New York market. But again, Hong Kong, just general business practices in Hong Kong made it for safer business for the Hong Kong people. You know what I mean? So again, I was doing business with everybody in the market at that point, with the same people that Evans was doing business with too. So I was getting information from them. And I shouldn't say everybody in the market, but from people that were well tuned in.
So
And
is there a point where the drag from Evans is affecting your ability to do business with your other clients or any of these vendors or anything?
not at all.
No,
Not at
okay.
all. No, in fact, I mean, I wasn't, it's
I
funny,
mean,
I
you're
wasn't,
just so you know, you're telling a very different story, and I don't mean this in a good or bad way, but what we were experiencing in the stores at this time is complete and utter chaos and panic, and every day they're pulling away something else financially, or we
but
have to
Scott,
get well, we have to get the receipts ahead of time. It was like one thing, or no, now there's no bonus, or the carrot's so far out there, you're never going to get it, and you're not feeling this pressure that we were all feeling.
but what the difference was? I was no longer an employee of the company. They treated me as a vendor
No, I
because
understand that, but
they,
yeah, I would have thought maybe you would have seen or felt in the orders, in the inability to pay, in that there would have been some sort of critical
there was
somethings
never,
that
I will
coincided with what we had happening in the stores.
I will tell you, there was never, not one vendor doing business with Evans ever got stiffed. Not one vendor.
That's
In
remarkable.
Hong Kong,
Right,
in
right.
Hong Kong or Korea or China, not one vendor. Again, the orders stopped. And like I say, it wasn't because I wasn't an employee, it wasn't really hurting me. It just made me work harder to get what I was missing from Evans. If I dropped a million from Evans, I would pick it up from Grecophilia or Europa or, whomever,
But unlike
you
these
know.
guys in New York and Canada and whatnot, you're still operating on these letters of credit. So these guys are going to get these orders and they're going to get paid still. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Again, the effect was that the orders were slowing down. You know what I mean? There was no money to put up front. So the orders were slowing down. I just viewed that as, yeah, I mean, the whole fur industry was sort of slowing down at that point.
Okay, so you're
You know?
seeing that from everybody? That
Yeah,
slowdown? Okay.
yeah. And you know how, like, again, here I am supporting a business in Hong Kong. I had to look toward, like at that time, like 94, 95, Spain was one of the biggest buyers. And then Russia became one of the biggest buyers in Hong Kong, and China. So, you have, as a business person, now you sort of move your shift and you say, okay, I can either take more Americans to make up, what I'm missing. Well, when I started, I had Evans and 6 customers. When I left, I had 27 customers and no Evans. So yeah, it was a different business. It was a big strain because now you got 27 different personalities to deal with. That was maybe that's what caused
But
me
you're
to
but
go
you're
into
also not wholly dependent on any one of them, which makes the ability to turn on a dime if something happens with one of them a lot easier. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. And again, like we discussed, while in Hong Kong, I did other things. I like sourced other things. When you're in a factory and you say, holy shit, what are you doing there? And you see it and you come up with an idea. I mean, when you're Evans, you can't do it. But when you're on your own, yeah, you can do it.
Yep.
And again, that's what you do. So I was never like smacked in the back of the head. Now I take it back. My commission was paid by check or transfer. And at the end, I had to wait. Not long, but it didn't come as expected. So again, that was something. But again, by that point, I was already on another track. You know
Right.
what I
All right.
mean? It
So
was
how long
before
does
nine.
your own business go on now at this point uh,
I moved.
after you
I
come back
moved.
to the States with your family?
Okay, so I moved to Connecticut, and I had to redesign the business. I mean, I sold the business because my eyes were on the goods in Hong Kong. You know what I mean? Now I'm sitting in Connecticut, or I'm sitting across the table from them. But Lawrence had already been a product of both Evans and Paul Becker's son. He was the associate in Paul Becker's son. So people and knew that they could trust him. So I knew that I'm going to leave and come back. It was after a couple of years that I saw that the whole industry was really starting to fade. And I said, the only way that I can, and it's the only thing that I knew. I spent my whole life,
Well,
grew
which
up.
we'll
I was
get into the next time we meet up. But right, it's the only thing you knew, and even when you left
Yeah,
this, you still couldn't leave it because you go right into another fur business. So which
exactly. And
again,
and I
we'll
said,
get into another time.
right. Well, and that's my story. That's exactly what I was going to tell you. At that point, I said, what advantage do I have having spent the last 7 years in Hong Kong? My advantage would be, and then realizing, okay, Evans used to come to Hong Kong, pay $1,000 for a coat. At the end, they were asking somebody else to go to Hong Kong, and I'll give you 2,500 for that coat. And then I realized, wait, the fur business, the retail business, I could now go in there and get it for $1,000. Everybody else that I'm competing with is paying the 2,000 or 2,500. I got an edge here. And I said, I'm going to go into the retail business for two reasons. I thought that it would be easier to put up my 1,000 to get back 3,000 than it would be for me to put up rent money for an office and relying on people to give me the 3 to 5%. You
Right.
know what I mean? So I went after that, plus the fact that I had two sons. So I wanted to build a legacy business. I know that when a son gets married, he's gone.
Yep.
If he's smart, he becomes a product of the wife's family. And I would have just been happy to have those two boys 11 to 5. Not every day, go home now, just to have them around. So I felt that I could build a business at Dicker and Dicker of Beverly Hills that would feed three families, which was my intent, and that was my plan. It didn't succeed, but it was my plan. And thank God it didn't succeed, because you know
Okay.
what happened.
Yep.
China. So I think the first I went with David, Walter, and Sharon. Oh, maybe Bobby was there too, because I have pictures of him and I on the Great Wall. We went out. When you were David, you worked, but you also got to do a little extra curricular activity. There were no cars. Literally, we stayed at the hotel. You stayed in your clothes. It was like horrible. There were no restaurants, only the government restaurants that Peking duck number one, number two. Terrible. It was freezing. There was no heat. The people on bicycles. You'd go out, the Chinese people, you'd say, hey, something. We do not speak to foreign devils. Because what they say right to me. We do not speak to foreign devils. No. This was, I think, in the Forbidden City. So, all right, then to China. So then I'm trying to think. Went there for a few years. You couldn't buy anything.
If you go to Seoul now, it is more advanced technologically than any American city. And it's like a glittering gem. But when I first started going there, half the streets were not even paved in downtown Seoul. And when it snowed, which it did a lot, they would get out there with brooms to clear the snow because they didn't have snow plows. So that'll give you an idea of where the Koreans were at the time. So the manufacturers who wanted to get going in the fur business and who had no fucking clue how to do it saw us really as their saviors because we were able to direct them what to buy, how to make it, what they were doing wrong. And so, yes, they would come out, they would do anything to get that business.
David Meltzer and all of his cronies were going over to the Orient, and they started seeing that they could do these knits. And that's how they got so involved in that and started doing that. No one else was really doing that, but Evans started doing it, and it was all because of the furs and going over to the Orient.
When we first used to go to Korea, the highway from the airport into town had metal stanchions because, you know why? In case the war broke out with North Korea, they used those highways for runways. And they had a curfew. You had to be in your hotel by 11 o'clock, no matter who you were, or you were arrested. There were armed guards all over the street. Then same story, went back to Korea, and they're totally like worse traffic than New York City.
Yep. And on that note, we'll save that because I want to do a nice deep dive on that as well. So, hey, man, thank you so much for spending some time with us. This is Larry Becker,
it is my pleasure.
Larry ran Evans' Far East operation and then left and went on his own. As you've just heard the whole story, that is quite an interesting caper, and it's deeper dive than anything we've gone into so far. So I really can't thank you enough. I'm Scott. I want to thank you for joining us again today on the podcast in support of the second film for Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier. We will definitely get together and do this again real soon, and we will definitely have to ask you, Larry, to come back and jam with us a little more on this. So
you can make it like a game show. I can come back tomorrow.
There you go. You'll be our Paul Lynn. So until that time, everybody, I'm Scott. Have a great day. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Looking forward to our next encounter.
Julius and Rose Meltzer went forward with the belief that their son's death was an accident, and this setback rocked the family during a time when brother A.L. and Herman's Evans Furs was skyrocketing to the top of the industry.
Those Meltzer kids obviously weren't taught how to cope or how to parent or relationship skills were really lacking, and that got passed down.
All I know is that he had a photographic memory, he was brilliant, and the family loved him.
I think she loved the way I looked, so she was always like I was her little doll.
All of his grandchildren wrote reports on Nuremberg at some point in school. And someone would always have an assignment, interview some relative about something.
Nonchalantly would toss a question out, and the beads of sweat were pouring off as he's trying to answer Uncle Bernie's question.
A lot of people live in fear that, oh my God, is that going to happen to me?
In the end, a lot of people got hurt. A lot of customers got hurt. It was just a bad thing.
He's with this dinosaur, toy dinosaur on the table, and he says, you know what happened to these dinosaurs?
was a very unique era.
Jeff and I got some calls, and people were just sobbing.
Well, they shut the doors on people. That was pretty high profile.
A fish has got to swim and an eagle's got to soar. That's their natural temperament and how they want to live and how they want to play. And when that's blocked, people are really unhappy.
On the next episode of the Companion Podcast, in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2.
What happens when you bring in bad chemistry? The first non-Meltzer CEO to lead the company.
But we never recovered in 88, 89.
I think there should have been a more thoughtful process.
He had so many people come in and so many people you fired.
He didn't really try to, well, it was a combination of things.
He walks into my office and he puts out his hand and he goes,
"So you're going down every year $100,000 about, or 20%?
He threw this dinosaur, toy dinosaur on the table, and he says, "This is what Evans is."
Drive a wedge into pretty much everything that had been part of the foundation of this.
On the next episode of the Companion Podcast, in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2.